And we are live once again. We've had a bit of a long hiatus, haven't we, David?
We have. I was just trying to look back and see when we were last.
It was about midsummer. I think holidays got in the way of things, and
We didn't
unfortunately,
reconvene afterwards.
no, we didn't. There's a lot to catch up on, but once again, we are back live with a rainwater research session. With our guru on all things rainwater, aren't we, David?
We hope so. We like to
Yes.
think that we are. We are becoming quite specialists at this now. So
Yeah. David, how was your Christmas? We haven't really spoken about this.
Christmas seems like a lifetime ago.
This is the first one of the year. We've got to talk about
I mean, just to give the people who aren't what we're giving. What is the 11th today?
it is the 11th.
So yeah, it feels like an eon ago. But yeah,
Yes.
Christmas was great. Managed to see all of the family, and yeah, had some time out as well. Christmas is always kind of the nice time of holiday, although the weather's of course a bit hit and miss. It's always nice to know that when you're off, everyone else is off. So when you do come back, you haven't got an absolute mountain to climb. A bit different, of course, from us on vacations. So, anyway, how about yours?
Very good. Enjoyed it thoroughly. It went too quick, as it always does.
Yeah.
But Christmas just feels like more work, if anything, because your days are so jam-packed. Like, you're visiting this family one day, you're visiting this one the next, and the next. You're just like,
Yeah, it's not really
like work is no, because like work is a welcome break to the madness. Any New Year's resolutions you've set yourself?
No, just be a bit more adventurous, I suppose.
A bit more adventurous.
See the world.
Very good, very good. Any goals you want to tick off this year? Anything like that?
No.
Okay.
The personal hobby stuff, but
No.
But I ain't running any marathons or anything silly like that. So maybe
I've started CrossFit since the new year.
Okay.
Which is a decision I'm regretting quite quickly.
Okay.
There's nothing like a marathon that I want to set myself for, but I thought I'd just try CrossFit. But it is bloody painful. My body's in pain, but we're just grinning and bearing it.
Got some goals.
Exactly. But anyway, enough of this jibber jabber. We'll be getting right into the crux of today's session. So, David, whilst we've got you, our main topic for today's session is talking about the relationship between rainwater harvesting and sustainable urban or sustainable drainage systems, as it's in the past been with sustainable drainage systems when people are looking at the plans of their project, whether it's a commercial building or even a small dwelling, they will need to conform to the SUDS legislation. But some people may think, well, capturing the rainwater, that would be, in essence, is the stormwater, and putting it to good use is the right thing to do and could meet those guidelines. But what is the relationship like? What is the relationship like? Sorry, is that way to go about it, or is there other things they would need to consider?
Yes, it's a super good concept to consider, and of course, we want to promote the reuse of rainwater as much as we can to reduce on mains water consumption. Just to give the viewers a bit of an idea, if they're not aware of what firstly is stormwater, and then what, of course, is rainwater harvesting. So sustainable urban drainage systems is what we do to reduce the surge runoff of stormwater into a particular area. And they're usually designed in terms of the surface area that's they're collecting from, where they are, of course. And then you generally have a year like event period, where this could be a 30-year event period, 50, 100, depending on the scope of the project, the scale. That's parameters can change significantly. And of course, the larger the storm event period, the bigger tank you need to support it. So the idea with SUDS is to reduce the risk of flood and just risks in general. And when we say it's sustainable urban drainage systems, of course, urban kind of points towards towns and cities, but you can look to install these on small developments as well. So that's just something to keep in mind, your arm. So catchment of that rainwater goes into an underground storage tank, usually quite big. And then from that storage tank, you generally had a choked out flow, some sort of break to slow the flow of that water down into the main drainage system. With rainwater harvesting, pretty much the concept stays the same to begin with. We're very much collecting that rainwater. It's going down into a storage tank. And then from that storage tank, we are retaining it so we can then reuse it later for our irrigation, for our toilet flushing, all these other different things which we talk about when we do rainwater harvesting. So that's the idea of rainwater harvesting. And rainwater harvesting generally will have an overflow to, again, could be to a soakaway or could be to a sustainable underground urban drainage system. So they've got similarities. The big question, of course, which we are really looking at today is, can we substitute with the rainwater? Can that rainwater help support the SUD solution. Now, in terms of legislation and regulations, the answer is no, more often than not. And that is because with the stormwater requirements, you must have that size of tank in place in case you have that year storm event. It could be that you have that year storm event when your rainwater harvesting system, which is parked in front of your SUD solution, it basically is full. So you haven't got any capacity, any surplus to the requirements. So we're not relieving the strain on the SUD solution, the sustainable urban drainage solution. So having the rainwater harvesting system is a really good thing to have because it's kind of a surplus to requirements. But of course, if you any surplus requirements, so in terms of future developments, all that sort of thing, the rainwater harvesting system will help preventing flood risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a substitution for SUDs. It's above and beyond that. And of course, if we do have that rainwater harvesting system in place, we can have all the benefits of the rainwater harvesting system in place. So we can reuse that water, the environmental impact, the reduction on the mains water demand, all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's not a substitution, but it certainly can help with the risk of floods because we have got potential additional volume in that rainwater harvesting tank. So your SUD solution is always there. Say it's 100 cube. If you have a 20,000 litre rainwater harvesting tank in front, if you were to have your event period and that rainwater harvesting tank was empty, you've got an additional 20,000 litres worth of volume there.
Yeah.
So it's helpful, but it's not a substitution.
Perfect. I think that encapsulates it very well in the fact that with rainwater harvesting, it is, as you mentioned, not the substitute because with SUDs and stormwater, it's for alleviating that potential 1 in 100 storm event.
Yes.
So if all of a sudden we had that event and your like you said, mentioned the rainwater harvesting tank was full, it means your system would just flood over and would fail. But saying that, would one way around it be just to have a gigantic rainwater harvesting system just in case there was that 1 in 100 year storm event?
I wouldn't like to comment. The chances are it would probably be okay, but for the legislation and regulations, it's probably not best because it's all to do with how much, first, of course, rainwater you're capturing and how much demand. If you've got an absolutely huge demand, which is always drawing down that rainwater harvesting tank, you're pretty much always going to have some sort of capacity within that tank. But we can't guarantee for sure that is going to be available when we have our big storm events. So they have to be kept separate.
Cool. So if someone was building their property, they would have to first take into their SUDs consideration and get that approved. And then if they wish to look at rainwater harvesting for saving water and put it to reuse, they'd have to look at that after that one.
Yeah. So yeah, the solution becomes prior to it because, of course, we're channeling the water from our catchment areas down into our retention tank first, and that will overflow into the attenuation solution. And of course, that would then have the choked outlet to reduce the flow away from the site. So it's kind of like a retaining tank up front, so we can reuse it later if we wish to.
Perfect. I think you've explained that very well. See, there's no rust. We haven't done it for a year, but you're right back at it. But that was the main discussion for today's session, was talking about the rainwater harvesting relationship with SUDs and how you can meet it. And as I think David's quite well said, it's when it comes to your project, your SUDs will be your kind of first protocol. That's the first thing you got to meet. And then rainwater harvesting is the addition to it. If you wish to save water on your project, then that's the way to go. But anyway, next is time for a new segment. We've reinvigorated, we've rechanged how we're going to do things here. And this is the one that I've made up on the spot. I did not steal it from anywhere else. But this new segment, instead of our project recap, this one is in the news. You excited for this?
You're already excited about
I
this.
am very excited for this.
I think that we could do some good things with this, but we'll have to...
because it's not always talking about us. It's talking about what's going on in the world, which is good. And there's 2 topics I've picked out for.
Yep.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So one I find really interesting is Pinterest has identified rainwater harvesting as one of its biggest trends for this year. So what they found in their data was that rainwater harvesting searches and topics have increased by up to 150% in the past year, making rainwater harvesting one of its top 5 trends of 2023. How incredible is that? Top 5.
That is quite exciting, yeah.
Of all the things in the world, rainwater harvesting, plucky rainwater harvesting is top 5. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it supersedes wastewater treatment. But
you and me both. But I was looking into it, and there's some interesting things. Because as we know, Pinterest is very much where people it's a site where people go for inspiration and ideas.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest searches is rainwater harvesting architecture.
Okay.
So people are looking for rainwater harvesting ideas within the architecture space.
This is going to move us on to our next point in a bit.
It will soon, but I just found it really incredible. And there's other ones like how to make like a rainwater harvesting system on a budget, rainwater barrel ideas. It's like people are trying to, maybe because they saw what happened last year with the drought in the summer and the lack of rainfall, looking for ways they can, obviously on a budget because of what's going on in the world, put a small rainwater harvesting system in place. Obviously, the most common type and most basic type is putting a water butt, connecting it to the shed, the greenhouse, or your garage to obviously water the garden. But there are people actually willing to do it.
Yeah, and the people are getting quite creative with the way they can capture water, where it is off a more permanent building like a shed, or if it's of some sort of tarpaulin, whatever it might be. If you're on an allotment, there are really interesting ways that people are putting together to channel rainwater into containers so they can reuse it later. As we know, the makeup and properties of rainwater is so much better than mains water, and it's arguably free. So really is good that people are showing some initiative in the rainwater harvesting sector to reuse rainwater better.
And one of the interesting ones was obviously rain barrel ideas. People wanting to get these old kind of wooden barrels, obviously drill a hole in the side to channel their downpipe in. But I figured this out the other day. I didn't really figure out. I read something. But with water butts itself, when you're trying to figure out what size you need, because obviously most people water their garden with a watering can, what you want to do is find out the size of a watering can. So say if it's a 1 litre watering can.
That's a small watering can, but go on.
Yeah, but 1 litre watering can. How much does that 1 litre like take you around the garden? So if you say you need free fill-ups, free water, that means you need 3 litres of water a day.
Yeah.
And if you times that by 100, that will give you 100 days of supply to water your garden, which means you need a 300 litre water butt.
Okay. So we're saying that the summer in the UK is 100 days long, are we?
No, I'm not saying that. Because 100 days is 3 and a bit months.
Okay.
But what you got to think about is that 100 days would last you the kind of like the summer that we just had, where really prolonged time without rainfall. But if you were to take that and you say if your garden needed 3 litres of water a day, like you could get a 300 litre water butt and that would last you 100 days.
Yeah.
How incredible is it?
That is pretty incredible, yeah.
So that's what we're thinking about. So if you are interested in getting a water butt or just starting off with rainwater harvesting, then maybe the best place to go is to just look at using the rainwater for your garden. Because I don't want to get all knowledgeable about how plants prefer rainwater over mains water, but if you are interested in saving water and obviously doing your bit for the environment, then getting a nice water butt in your garden will certainly help you kind of down the road to saving water. But I could go on for quite a while about this, but I feel on that very interesting topic, like it's becoming a lot more on people's front of mind.
Yeah.
I think what we found, especially last year, because of the summer, the drought, people are more inclined about saving water and using as much as possible. And from our own research, we find that people are genuinely interested in saving water rather than potential other savings.
Yeah. It's something we touched on quite a bit in CPD as well, in terms of the actual impact and how much you can potentially do, which is readily accessible to people. You just need to show, as I say, that little bit of initiative just to send out and just do that. Even if it is just installing a water butt, that's just a huge first step to really obviously benefiting your own garden, but obviously being outside the garden, your own peace of mind, being outside. There's so many benefits to just really incorporating this into your daily routine.
You ready for our next section of these?
Yep. I'm going to be
oh no, you're going to be very cynical and you're very negative about this, and I found this quite cool. But upon doing the research, there's a new startup in the UK that have developed a solar panel that is based on or uses water to power or for helping the heating and cooling of a house. I find this very cool. So what they've developed are windows that act as solar panels, and they've got a thin layer of water that's pressurized within the window pane. So when obviously the sun hits the window, this heats up the water. So then this puts the heating back through, I believe it was the flooring and the pipework, to basically a heating system, and they'll pump the heat throughout the house. You are very cynical about this.
I'm really much in favour of using rainwater harvesting in more, or water just generally in more applications, I'm very much in favour of how much the direction it's kind of taking. I'm just a little bit concerned about you've mentioned solar panels there, so that gives hopefully people a bit more of an idea in terms of kind of what the premise is. But when we are this is obviously new in the UK, so this I'm not too sure in the UK how energy efficient is going to be.
Okay,
and I'm also really with when solar panels first came out. We obviously had a huge payback period from the government, basically supporting the introduction of rainwater of those solar panels, and people could get grants back on from selling their surplus energy back to the grid. So I'm not too sure with these panels. If I might need to do a lot more research into myself if we're going to really look at this in more detail. But how efficient they are, if they are as good as what solar panels are, then great. But there is, of course, an associated cost. It's a big investment for someone to put this out. As is with anything, there's always a huge outgoing, and then you would hopefully claw back some of that money over the next few years. So I need to see what that future prospect is. If they could get their money back over a 10-year period, that's fantastic. And of course, they probably, with these new windows, they've probably got like triple glazing, so they're probably more energy efficient anyway. So I like the concept. I'm just a bit skeptical about what the future is.
I think it's a very cool concept, and like you say, there is going to be that payback period that will be of people's interest. They want to know how much money, what's their return going to be, especially of kind of the energy they're going to save. And as we know, the price of energy has gone up an extortionate amount. But I just think it's a very cool idea, and I think it's very similar to what Germany do in their factories, in the fact that the heat they produce, they contain and then put back to reuse, if that makes sense. So if those of you that don't know, our factory is in Tenningen, in Germany. All the heat that is made from the machine, the plants during the manufacturing process is actually captured and retained within the factory. And that heat that's generated then heats the offices all the office blocks within Graph itself. So all the kind of heat that we give off, instead of it affecting the world, we retain, capture, and reuse it to obviously heat our offices. So one, we're not using new energy to heat the offices, we're using kind of surplus energy and surplus heat. Which is very cool. Negative nearly over it, I don't think it is. But anyway, that's it for our segment of In the News. I hope you enjoyed as much as David did, obviously. But now it's time to answer all the questions that have come in during today's live session. So I believe we've got a few come up. So the first question that's come in is the rainwater pump noisy? I believe this means when it's in operation.
Okay, so with all rainwater harvesting systems, we generally have a volume of water, which is, of course, retaining that water so it can be reused later. That rainwater can, if it's in a static place where it's raised, can gravity feed to appliances. But it might be that if you've got a tank at ground level or potentially under the ground, we've got to get that water to our appliances, to our extraction points when a demand is created, in which case we need to have some sort of pump. Now, you could have a submersible pump, which much goes inside the tank, or you could have a wall-mounted pump console, which basically goes onto some sort of utility in some sort of pump or plant room. So there's a couple of options in terms of the pumps. When we talk about submersible pumps, we are very much have the pump in the underground tank or above ground tank, and it's surrounded in water. So any noise generated by the pump is going to be dampened just a bit, so you're not going to get the full frequency of that pump. So that's just something to bear in mind. If you are concerned about noise, going down the submersible pump route is probably better for you. With above ground pumps, we're going to have this pump, as I say, potentially in a plant room, someone's garage. So when a demand is created, like when you flush a toilet or open outside tap, that pump is going to sense the drop in pressure in the pressurized pipeline. It's then going to kickstart with a sensor, and it's going to pump water to that outlet point until the outlet point is of course closed. The valve is closed. The pipeline's repressurized and the pump shuts off. So the pump will basically run for as long as a demand is required. And when that pump is in operation, it's going to create the motor spinning, so it is going to create some vibration. It's going to create some noise. So generally speaking, depending on the size of the system, that noise could change significantly. It could be that you have 1 pump or 2 pumps for bigger commercial developments.
Yep.
For small domestic properties, we kind of look at pumps which have around about 50 decibels, wall-mounted ones initially, and then that can scale upwards. But yeah, just be mindful that when a pump is running, it will create a noise. So the location is quite important. So you don't really want to put it in a garage which kind of backs onto your main bedroom, for example, if you've got a downstairs bedroom, because if someone does go to the toilet in the middle of the night, that pump is then going to kickstart and it might wake up your partner in the bed next to you. So something to be mindful. Yeah, pumps are noisy, so when they are running, just be mindful of where you install them. If you haven't got a choice really in where you put it, you can of course put some sort of like backing or stepping away behind the unit to stop the vibration, which is where a lot of the noise comes from. So something to be mindful of, but they're not super noisy, but you need to be kind of sensitive about how you approach and install it.
And if say someone was conscious of the amount of noise that'd be created from pump, would you recommend a submersible pump over, say, a wall-mounted
Yes,
one?
I would like to initially gain, if they really want to get into the depths of it, I would generally like speak with them over the phone, hopefully get some technical drawings off that particular project with them, kind of see where the layout of the property is, and potentially discuss with them where is the underground tank going to be, where could the potential pump console going to be, because there's got to be a relationship distance between those two items, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion where the operation of that pump isn't going to disturb their daily lives. So it is something to consider when you're designing a rainwater harvesting system into a property, certainly if it's an external wall-mounted pump.
Perfect. I think you've answered that incredibly well. And then the next question that we've had come in. So with rainwater harvesting, do the different roof types matter when it comes to sizing systems?
Yes, it does. It's quite an important question there. So when we talk about different types of roof, there's generally 3 things I would normally consider when we're talking about sizing of the systems in terms of the efficiency coefficient. When we look at the British Standard for Sizing Rainwater Harvesting Systems, one of the statistics we take into consideration is the type and the pitch of the roof. So the pitch of roof and the type of roof will give you a reduction coefficient. So it could be anything from 90% down to 50%, depending on the type of roof. A couple of examples would be if you've got like a 45-degree like slate roof, so quite a nice pitched roof, you're going to potentially retain most of that water, so generally about 90%. If you're coming off something like a thatched roof or a green roof where you've got some plantation, that's going to reduce your yield significantly, potentially down to about 50%. So that's really kind of beneficial if you're trying to reduce stormwater runoff, for example, from your property. Having a green roof is a really good way to go about it, because those plants are going to absorb some of that water for you. But in terms of rainwater harvesting, getting the maximum potential yield, generally, yeah, it's important to take consideration where you're collecting from. So yeah, the catchment area, is it multiple catchment areas, the pitch of the roof, and what the roof is made of. It could be a flat roof, it could be slate. Yeah, as I say, many different options for you. So it's something to consider when sizing a rainwater system, because the coefficient will significantly have an impact on how much rainwater you can capture.
Perfect. Answer that one very well. See, no rust here. You nailed these. Then the next question that we've had come in. How does a mains water backup system work?
Okay. When we talk about rainwater harvesting, we generally always favour and prioritise the use of rainwater over mains water. So the system's always going to pull from a rainwater reservoir first, and then potentially have a mains water backup. Now, there are systems where we just have just rainwater only. So in which case, if you were to run out in your underground tank, you would therefore have no water to reuse until you have your next rainfall event. In those situations, you can implement solutions which have a mains water backup. A mains water backup is pretty much has a low level sensor in the tank. So when you do drop sufficiently low in the tank of your rainwater, that sensor is going to go, hang on a minute, we're out of rainwater. We need to switch over to a mains water feed temporarily. And that will temporarily, as I say, whether it's via a sensor or some sort of float switch, will put the system into a mains water mode. So anything that your system is connected to on the rainwater will have that mains water as a substitution until you have your next rainfall event, of course, we have more storage volume in the tank, and the system will automatically switch back. As I say, it's quite important, that last note there, that the operation system is automatic. It's not just because something that the homeowner needs to get involved with. The detection of level of that rainwater in that tank is picked up by the system, and the automatic operation between the two rain and mains will be automatic for the unit, for the customer. So really is quite nice to incorporate some sort of mains water backup feed to a system to always ensure you have some sort of water going to your appliances.
Perfect. You've answered that one incredibly well. And I think that's it. I believe that's all the questions that have come in for today's session. I believe the person behind the computer, yep, we got the thumbs up. Looks like that is the last question for today's session. But David, thanks for your time today. Hope you enjoyed it.
It's been good to be back.
Did you enjoy the new segment?
I did enjoy the news segment. Well, it was a nice thing to really dive deep into some ideas that the world is approaching onto the sector. So it's always good to expand your horizons.
And did you learn something new about my rule of thumb in sizing a water butt?
I did, yeah. I'm going to go back down to the guaranteer section later and see how they
size their
water
water
butts.
exactly.
Yeah,
they need to learn this. This is very important information.
It is.
But anyway, thank you for joining us once again. We've certainly missed doing these, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been really good to be back, and looking forward to next time, which will be wastewater, I would imagine.
We're talking wastewater again, aren't we, David?
We are, yeah.
Your favourite subject.
It is my favourite subject.
Exactly. But anyway, once again, thank you for taking part and watching today's, and we will see you next week for a wastewater wisdom session, which we're very much looking forward to. So other than that, have a great week, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon.